Hi, everyone, and welcome to Jehovah Boy. I'm your host, Doug Smith, and this is the podcast all about struggle, hardship, trauma, bad shit, overcoming it, channeling it into your creativity without letting it define you. I am currently wearing a wrist brace. If you're watching this, you can see it in the flesh. I am a wrist brace person. I never thought I would be this person, but here we are. I've always had a very negative connotation with anybody who chronically wears a wrist brace. I'm hoping this will not be chronic. I will rip this thing off as soon as I'm able to. I'm assuming this is temporary, but I have known a couple people in my life that I've never seen without a wrist brace. And those two people were my elementary school librarian, a very fragile, skittish woman, and my mom's friend who supposedly had pancreatic cancer, stage 4, for 20 years. She was a medical anomaly. She battled pancreatic cancer for 20 years. And when she finally did die, it wasn't that. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't that. Anyway, chronic wrist brace usage just conjures an image of paranoid, neurotic hypochondria. So honestly, it's pretty fitting that I'm finally wearing one. But yeah, I've always just had, they just look gross. I mean, this one's black and kind of sleek looking, kind of looks like a bionic arm, but the flesh colored ones that just look, they're obvious, but not quite obvious enough. They look like they smell. You don't know what the person's skin, what the condition of the person's skin is like underneath. They're just, as someone who's a germaphobe, it just looks like a sanitary nightmare. But it certainly humbled me. You do not realize how much you use your hands and wrists, the mobility of your wrist. You do not realize what a marvel they are until it is incapacitated. So I'm getting pretty good at my ambidextrousness, using my left hand. It's forced me to slow down, be a lot more present. Simple, mundane tasks take much longer. Unloading the dishwasher used to take 5 minutes. Now it takes about 20. Pulling my pants up, it's quite an event. Wiping my ass with my left hand. Let's just say I'm taking a lot more showers these days. I wish I had a better story behind how it happened. It's pretty lame. I was in the grocery store with my son. He was standing on the back of the cart, riding the cart down the aisles, as kids are prone to do. And at one point, I'm grabbing something off the top shelf. I turn around, and he and the cart are mid-tip. It's just mid-timber. The kid and the cart just on their way down. And I reached out to grab it and set the cart upright with my right hand to save my child. He would have been crushed by 3 cases of LaCroix, which is a pretty embarrassing way to go out. So I saved my son's life, but I heard a popping sound. I heard and felt a popping sound in my wrist and immediately knew something was very wrong. I also immediately just went into denial and thought, it's fine, power through. When something like this happens, you're supposed to immobilize it, give it rest, I guess, ice it. I did the complete opposite. I did nothing, no treatment whatsoever. If anything, I was massaging it, trying to pop it back into place. I don't know what I was trying to pop into place. I didn't know what the fuck happened in there, but something was wrong. And I was just twirling my wrist around all day, hoping it would amend itself, getting worse and worse and worse. And then the next morning, I was like, you know what, something's bad, something's wrong. I couldn't get an appointment with an orthopedic surgeon, so I went to the ER. They did an x-ray, no broken bones. They couldn't give me an MRI, so they don't know the internal damage necessarily, but they're like 99% sure I have some sort of torn ligament. So I'm in this brace until further notice. And drinking a glass of water is pretty funny. Check this out. Look, it's okay with a brace, but if I didn't have this brace on, I got to drink like two-handed, baby. Two-handed, Trump style. It really has humbled me. And it's fitting that I'm wearing a wrist brace. It's fitting that I've suffered this minor physical injury because my guest today is hilarious comedian Ophira Eisenberg. I've only gotten to know Ophira over the last couple of years. working at the Comedy Cellar together here and there. We have kids the same age. We both have sons that are same age, and we've gotten to know each other. She's an awesome person, very funny. You may remember her from her stint hosting the NPR game show Ask Me Another. And now, speaking of physical injuries, she has a whole show about them. It's called Leaving a Mark, a show about scars. Every show she invites a comedian guest on stage to tell the story of their most prominent scar. I was a guest a couple weeks ago, actually, and shared my tale of my face slashing, which I'm assuming if you're listening to this and you know me, you know about that because it's my biggest claim to fame. I peaked, for those of you who didn't know. I peaked in 2018 when I told the story about getting my face slashed on the subway. But if you haven't seen it and you're curious and you've been watching this podcast and wondering why is this man's left side of his face disfigured, check it out. I did a whole a story about it. It's a true story. I told the tale of what happened to me. Just look on YouTube. Doug Smith, This Is Not Happening. It's at 5.9 million views. So let's crank those up. Let's get it to 6. It's the biggest thing I've ever done. If anything, the guy went to prison. Who got me. I'm hoping he gets out soon so he can carve up the other side so I can get another viral hit. I need it. Anyway, I had a great time on her show. It's a great show. It really is like a communal bonding experience between her, the audience, her guest, because everybody has scars of some sort, if not physical, emotional, but most of us have some sort of physical scars. But nobody more than Ophira. Her body is a map of physical trauma. She basically goes head to toe, pointing out all these scars, telling all these stories, and some are far worse than others. Some left serious emotional scars. I don't want to give anything too much away about the show because it's definitely worth checking out. But she's been through a lot of shit. She turned it into an awesome show. Yeah, I do have a couple scars. The face scar is the most notable because freak accidents, this is a rite of passage for me, because freak accidents seem to be a genetic component of Smith men. They really do. That's why when my son stabbed himself in the eye with a stick at the ripe age of 2.5, it was horrifying, but to be perfectly honest with you, I felt a sense of relief because I thought, you know what? I know it's coming. I don't know when. Hopefully he got it out of his system. If you listen to episode 2 with Chris Gethard, I went into a little bit more detail about it. He's fine, by the way. The stick, he was running down a hill. He fell. The stick went into the corner of his eye. Miraculously, did not do any damage to the eyeball itself. It severed. It went an inch deep into his eye socket. When the surgeon told us that, my wife's knees buckled and I had to catch her from hitting the ground. But it did not do any damage to the actual eye. It severed his tear duct. He had to have a little silicone tube put in there. But other than that, he was tip-top. He was in an eye patch for 2 days, back on the playground the very next day. Kids are more resilient than anything or anyone. It's amazing. I would have been milking that for fucking years. But he was completely unfazed. So yeah, he stabbed himself in the eye with a stick when he was 2.5. I got my face slashed by a deranged homeless man when I was 28. My brother was slightly younger when he was working for a tree trimming service and dropped a running chainsaw on his wrist. He definitely needed a little bit more than a brace for that one. It almost cut his entire hand off. I think it was dangling by a single bone or tendon. His buddy got him down out of the tree, wrapped it in a t-shirt, rushed him to the ER. He left Jehovah's Witnesses shortly after that. This is just dawning on me because I don't know how many blood transfusions he may have required for that. I mean, you know, what's the number one way to lose buckets of blood? Slit your wrists. He cut his hand practically clean off So they must have just unloaded their full supply on him. I don't know. I've never asked him, but it was bad. It was bad. His wrist is just solid scar tissue, but they were able to reattach everything miraculously. I don't know how they did it, but he's, full mobility in that wrist, even though it was literally dangling by a thread. So that was quite a that was his freak accident. And nobody, however, can top my dad. My dad lost his eye in a grilling accident before I was born. He was flipping burgers with a 2-prong barbecue fork, caught the fork on the the grill grate, tried to pry it loose, sprang out of his hand, popped him in the eye, lost the eye. Way to ruin a 4th of July cookout, right? Just running through the yard, screaming, everybody just barfing potato salad all over the place. Must have been quite a show. I don't know whoever's burger he was grilling at the time. I'm sure it was vastly overcooked. But he was rushed to the hospital, apparently not soon enough. I was told that if he got there sooner, they might have been able to salvage the eye. This was also 60 years ago. Put some fucking leeches on it probably, but they couldn't save the eye. They couldn't save it, so he has had a glass eye my whole life. He's had a glass eye in his left socket. All freak accidents. It is truly a rite of passage. So anyway, my guest, Ophira, she has quite a tale about her scars, and we get into one story in particular that is pretty gutting. But she's here, and she made a hilarious comedy out of truly traumatic experiences. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Ophira Eisenberg. First and foremost, how is your podcast going? Tell us a little bit about it. Parenting is a joke.
Yeah, it's
right?
going okay.
On iHeartRadio.
Yeah. iHeartRadio, iHeart Podcasts. So yeah, it's going okay. We're just past our halfway mark of our first season. So we've
Congrats.
got thank you. Yeah. So it's great. I've loved doing it. I've loved talking to people, finding their stories, and would I say I've learned anything? You know what I've learned about all stand-up comics who have been foolish enough to have children? They're hilarious about it, but everybody craves, for the first time in their life, stability. Because they're like, you know what this kid needs? Stability.
Yes.
Yeah, even though that's something we all kind of, pursued purposefully, instability. Not having a job, not going into the office, not being tied down to one place. You create this entire life based on no, I don't want that. That's disgusting. That's not who I am. Yep. And then you have a kid and you're like, how can I have more of the other thing?
Yeah, you're 100% right. We've all run from it for years.
Yeah.
And such instability from day to day, even just based on the amount of shows you do in a night. You know what I mean? You could go to bed 2 a.m. one night, and then the next night be like, oh, I don't have any shows. I'm going to go to bed at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sleep schedules all over the fucking place.
No one understands this either in the real world. Not that they should. That they're like, well, how many weeks ahead of time do you have all your gigs? And I'm like, it's all some months, some days, some weeks. You're putting together your schedule all the time based on how different places avails. There's no central headquarters.
Yeah, there's no central headquarters. That's true. I think that is what everybody assumes.
Yeah, they do. There's just lots of juggling, lots and lots of juggling. Every week I'm like, oh, and then today I got a gig for in a couple of weeks, and I had already made a plan, and it's sad with the child that I have to be like, I guess we're not going to the Bronx Zoo that day because mommy's leaving town.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, you gotta make them want it,
Is that the truth? I don't know.
I think so. As I had one of those moments yesterday where you ever try to go, our sons are about to say, how old is your son now? He's 7.5? 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 7.5, right.
Okay. So I'm sure you've probably found yourself in a situation where you try to go above and beyond to be like the fucking most kick-ass, coolest parent, hitting them with this cool surprise thing that they're going to be so psyched for. So like I
Yep.
picked my son up from school yesterday. He just finished this reading program because he has an IEP. They haven't necessarily diagnosed him with dyslexia, but that's pretty much what he has. So they've been working with him really hard, and he's
Okay.
improved leaps and bounds. Really, really
Great.
proud of him. He's been sticking to this program for like 5 months. So I picked him up yesterday, and as a surprise, I was like, "Hey, man, guess where we're gonna go?" And he was like, "Where?" I was like, "Dave and Buster's." Now, keep in mind, I fucking hate Dave and Buster's.
It's
There's
so
nowhere.
loud to say something just ridiculous, but it is so loud with the wrong kind of sounds because it's the sound of 1 million video games at the same time.
Yeah. Thankfully, I feel like through 7 years of parenting now, I definitely have issues with patience, and my frustration level reaches a burnout point pretty easily. But sounds, for some reason, I'm able to tune out sounds pretty well.
Wow.
Sometimes too well, where he could be screaming and blood curdling scream and pain in the next room. I'd be like, that's fine. So
Don't
I brought
become a stereotypical dad, okay? Come on now.
But I brought him there, and I was feeling so proud of myself. Like, look at me. I'm bringing him to fucking Dave and Buster's on a weekday and just loading up this gift card and letting him eat whatever he wants. And he gets French fries and he gets some disgusting purple slushy, and he's like barely touching either one of them.
And they're $9 million a piece.
Yeah,
You're like,
exactly.
Eat this overpriced junk food.
Yeah, right? Sometimes you actually want them to eat their junk food just to get your money's worth, right?
Absolutely. Oh, no. I was at, I think it was Yankee Stadium. I bought my kid a hot dog. He didn't want to eat it. I was like, I yelled from the stands, eat the goddamn hot dog. That's a random thing to yell at your child. I was like, put down your book, stop reading.
Yeah, eat those lips and assholes. Whatever the fuck that is, eat it. I went through a phase where I was, the food thing is such a battle there, where my son he's now a vegetarian. He's a self-proclaimed vegetarian. He's like this animal rights crusader. He'll even to the point where we were standing waiting across the street the other day. We were standing at the crosswalk, and he looked down and he looked at my boots. He was like, "Are those made of leather?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he just goes, and he just shook his head in disgust.
Well, ask him what he thinks they should be made of. Green peppers? Like they're,
Yeah, right?
I mean, I love a Rothy, but leather shoes last.
Yeah.
That's the last I'm going to say. All your animal activist listeners can get mad at me right now. Just write all of your letters to dougsmith@gmail.com.
Yeah, I need to keep my feet, or there will be no future trips to Dave & Buster's.
By the way, the next time you want to go to Dave & Buster's, you let me know, because I have a bunch of money on gift cards that we didn't move through, because I did a very similar thing to that you are talking about here. I've been down this path, and I loaded a bunch of cards, and I went there, and I bought him some crazy $12 disgusting food that he barely ate. Yeah, I feel everything here. So next time you want to go, you let me know.
But here was the real icing on the cake. No pun intended, because also, so he has his French fries, a slushie, he's barely touching the stuff, and then he sees a big thing of chocolate cake on the menu. He's like, "I want chocolate cake." It's like $12. And I was like, "You're not eating the shit that's in front of you." No, I'm not no. It'd be like $25 worth of high fructose corn syrup in front of you that you're not going to eat. So he's already pissed at me from the get-go, already having a miserable time. And then we're playing one of these games, and I'm letting him do it. I didn't know that he wanted me to participate. It was like a skee ball game. Oh, yeah. And at one point, he looks up at me, and I don't want you to think that he's this fresh, smart-ass kid. It completely took me off guard. He doesn't do things like this, but he looks up at me, he goes, "Come on, aren't you going to throw? Throw the ball, you loser." He called me a loser, and it fucking cut me to the core. He could have called me an asshole. He could have called me a piece of shit. He called me a loser. And I was just I was like, "What did you call me?"
I hope you hit him. Did you hit him?
With the skee ball, yeah. I had a bludgeoning device in my hand. It's like the worst thing you can call somebody. And I was like,
I
what did you
know.
call me? He's like, I was just kidding. I was like, don't call me a loser. And I really had to restrain myself. I was like, you're calling me the loser? You're telling me to throw? It's bowling. You don't throw it. You roll it. And you're throwing it in the wrong fucking lane. So, I know you are, but what am I?
Exactly. I know all those other times I told you that you won, you actually lost. So you're the loser, all right? You've been losing the whole time, kiddo.
Yeah, right?
I know. No, but they know how to get us. I was just talking to someone else about the it's something that we learn. It's interesting seeing little kids that they don't have filters. They just don't have filters. And they're using a lot of words that they don't even understand the impact. And that's part of what it is. But they're a little too honest at times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like
they can really hurt your feelings.
My child regularly, he did this thing for a while where he thought first of all, he used to just yell penis on the street. He just used to walk down the street and yell penis, and people would laugh, right? And a bad reinforcement. And I was like, don't do that. You can't yell that on the street. And then he decided that he was going to yell my age. He caught wind that I was a little hesitant. I had a birthday that I was a little hesitant about my age. And he picked up on that and decided to be funny to yell it on the street.
Yeah.
And then I was like, don't yell my age on the street. And he was like, why? And then I got all weird and I was like, am I not a feminist or a good woman? Because I should just embrace my age. And it got so fraught. And then I was just like, just yell penis. You know what?
Yeah, right? They can really make you go down a paranoid spiral.
The whole thing. Yeah.
And was he saying my mom is such and such, or he was just shouting? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep. The whole thing, actually, from the point of view of being a mother, was just so fraught because we are in a place right now, in theory, where as a woman, I should be embracing all of this stuff that in the past you're supposed to be ashamed of and be like, fuck you. That was the patriarchy telling me that I'm ashamed of it. I'm not. And here it is. But I've got some residual issues and I'm grappling with them. And I was like, maybe I should let my son yell out my weight just down the street and just be like, that's right, everybody.
Yeah. My son's going to be like, my dad's a loser. My mom supports him because she has a real job. Yeah, he'll get there.
Yeah, well.
So the penis thing, do you know how this started? Because I remember when I was in school, that was like a game that boys used to play. I don't know if you're aware of this. George is shaking his head. So you start out like sitting at the lunch table. Somebody starts out saying it really like a whisper, like penis. And then the next person has to say it like 1 decibel louder. And it subsequently gets louder and louder and louder till eventually some kid's like, penis. And, they will eventually get yelled at and the game gets shut down.
Oh, I did not know this. Now, I feel like he started doing this during the pandemic, which means that he did it as a game of one. So it also must be somehow in that DNA strand that you guys
right? Yeah.
It must just be baked into that.
Just can't stop talking about those things. Oh,
as soon as possible. And now he's just like, well, right now, I think as we talked about at some point, it's just if there is one sentence without the word fart in it, we should celebrate because it is just constant fart.
Well, at least your kid finds farts amusing. See, I have tipped the scale because I not only joke about farting, but actually do physically fart so much that my son is like repulsed by it now. To the point that he'll like roll his eyes, be like, oh, come on, gross.
That's great. You've done it. You figured it out.
Yeah. They need something to rebel against, right? So you got to act like an animal so that they can, step their game up and actually be a civilized member of society.
Oh yeah, my with both my husband and I have like artistic careers. I know we're raising a financial planner. I know it.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many times I can say like, we don't have the money for that. And he's like, how do I become not you? Because I never want to hear that again.
That's great. It's great. We're going to create a whole generation of overachievers, the next billionaires.
Because we need more of them. They're so great. They've been doing so many great things.
Yeah, right.
All the billionaires have really, when we thought they would save the world, we were on it.
Yeah. Good guys. Good guys.
Oh,
man. This is all just making me want to play the penis game all over again. You should ask him if that's a thing in school. That's so funny though that he started this on his own during the pandemic.
I did ask him the other day. Now this is just second grade, and I said, "Is there any? Are you aware of like some kids in your class being popular or not popular? Is there any of that going on there?" And he goes, "No, Mom, it's second grade. You know, that's later on when you get the punks and the jocks, and we both know they're stupid." And then you get the nerds and the freaks, and we know they're smart. And I'm like, what are you reading? Where are we getting this from?
Right.
Like,
when did you watch The Breakfast Club?
Because I was like, there's no punks around.
That's
no
great.
Punks around. Yeah. But I like that he's, and then my husband goes, not all the punks are dumb. And I was like, listen, we're not getting into this right now. We're not going to start going through the minutia of these.
The punks are enlightened. That's what they're rebelling against, man.
That's
is
right.
System.
That's right. Exactly. Capitalist bullshit. That's what they say. They eat the rich. I'm on the punk side.
I also find like it's tempting to like find out from them what other kind of like schoolyard shit that they may have that may have carried through generations, like writing like, do you want to join the Pen 15 club and writing penis on somebody's hand? Like, did you do that?
No,
that wasn't a thing.
No.
So you start to usually like, you want to join the Pen 15 club. And they're like, yeah, because of course you want to be part of any club that you're offered a membership to.
And then you're right.
And then you start to write it, you pen, and it looks, the one is an I, and then the
beautiful.
The 5 is an S. Boom, you got penis on your hand.
It's brilliant. I love it.
I love it. And then you remember your epidermis is showing, right? If you say like,
I do, yes,
say something,
right.
Your epidermis is showing. They're like, oh God, they check their fly immediately, and then you're like, no, it just means skin.
Ha ha ha! Look at that smart, nerdy humor being used against you.
Right.
No, this sounds like no. As girls, we just we just literally tortured each other as soon as we had any social skills. We'd be like, Cheryl's ugly. Like, what? That was that. It was just mean and terrible.
Yeah. You guys don't waste any time. Cut right to the core as soon as you can.
That's right. I mean, that's how I remember it. Just the idea of Mean Girls happened early.
Yeah.
Early. Yeah.
So did you, how soon into parenting did you feel like this is insanity, the wealth of material I'm drawing from this, I need to talk to other parents about this, because it's a great idea for a podcast, and I can't believe it didn't exist sooner, so kudos to you.
Well,
I imagine it's probably very cathartic.
It is somewhat cathartic, and to be honest with you, I was pitching it for years. I pitched it actually almost as soon as I had a kid, because I was just aware at that moment that all of a sudden there were a bunch of comics around me who were just having kids. And I thought, this hasn't happened before. And now there was just more, there was more comics, and there were more comics that were doing doing great stuff. And then, I don't know, it was just weird. I was like, I think something's changed in the world where maybe more people in this unstable career are feeling okay about bringing another kid into I have no idea why, but it felt like all of a sudden, and they weren't quitting. It wasn't like, and then I had to quit, and then I quit and I had to get a corporate job or whatever. I mean, I imagine some people did, but it seemed to me a lot of people I knew were just having kids. So I was pitching it around, and I couldn't quite find a place for it. But I did not give up, because I was like, God, and then more and more comics had kids. And so I just find the hours, the marriage of this career to having a family, none of it makes any sense. School is never going to start at 4 p.m. Like, it's just, the world is set up for two parents with one staying at home, one going to a full-time job that is literally from 9 to 5. That's how the entire world is constructed.
Yeah.
And so few people fit into that at all. And that's why most people are both people with careers, so they're always getting other help, or they're moving to places where it's just, everyone is solving all the time because our society is not set up at all for the careers we have and the way that the families are structured. And definitely stand-ups. I mean, can you imagine a world where you would go to a club and they would be like, oh, yeah, there's a daycare attached.
Yeah, right.
Or something.
Yeah.
Or so then the other idea is like, you'll just never have a child in this profession. I don't know. It's messed up.
Yeah. Have you ever brought him to a show with you?
I mean, I think he's too young to, but I had to because I was booked and my husband was out of town. And my babysitter fell through and I was just like, what do I do? And honestly, I do not feel like I can call the club and be like, hey, I can't come in because I couldn't find a sitter, because they'll be like, oh, good to know. Let's never book you again.
Yeah.
So yeah, because there's just plenty of people. So I was like, hey, is it cool if my son, the manager has a small kid. So I was like, all right. I was like, is it okay if my son hangs out in the green room? And they were like, okay, yeah. And everyone was very cool about it. And I put him in the green room with an iPad, and he doesn't get a lot of that. So he was over the moon.
Yeah, best night of his life.
But I wasn't completely on it because I was thinking about
of course
placing him and da-da-da, and is it okay? And I hope he doesn't leave the door. Like, I don't know. He's young still. He's just little.
Yeah, and you've
Cannot
also...
be trusted.
You've also done this long enough to know that most comics are degenerate fuck-ups. So the idea of leaving him in the care of mature adults in the green room is completely out the window, you know? If you had to go through those comics and be like, which one of these would I have babysit my kid? None of them.
If I see if I take a flight with another comic and they are at the emergency exit seat, I'm like, oh, so we die. Because that's your role. And I know what you're capable of, and it's not that.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly, man. Yeah,
So, anyways, I did bring him, but it wasn't my best set. I was just like, and people. That's another thing about I think a creative career is that there's this idea. Just bring you need separation. This is a very different mindset. You can't travel with your kid and then just be like, it's like two different zones. You're like, now I'm parenting zone. Now I'm stage person. It's two different people. And it's like, you need what do they call those chambers that you go through after you scuba dive so you don't get the bends?
Like a decompression chamber? Yeah.
You need one of those. You need and it can't just be a L train ride, It's like, you need like a heartbeat to make the transition.
You do, yeah. Yeah, I have luckily not had to bring my son to a show yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen one of these days.
Oh, yeah.
And then that might be the point where because he puts me on such a pedestal right now. He's already saying like when he gets older, he wants to be a comic. And I'll be like, well, buddy, that's cool, but it's a really hard path. You gotta, it's a lot of high highs and low lows. It's not a stable career. You might have to have another job to earn some money while you're doing it. And he's like, well, what did you do? And I was like, well, I had a dog walking service for over a decade. He's like, great, I'll be a dog walking comedian. It's like, no, please fucking aspire to more. Please.
So just say all comics eat meat. So there's that.
Yes. Oh, man, brilliant. That'll nip it in the bud right there. But there's also part of me that worries like, yeah, what if I have to bring him to a show and he's hanging out in the green room and he's like watching me on the TV screen or whatever that they have back there. And yeah, I'm sure my head would not be in the game. And then like, I think, what if I bomb in front of my kid? And then he's like, oh, this is what he does every night and he sucks at it.
Suck. I know. And I just like I'm not very dirty on stage or anything, but my material is not fit for my child.
Yeah.
At one point, it will be. And as far as I can tell from other comics whose kids are in the 16-year, I was just talking to Laurie Kilmartin, brilliant comic the other day. It's amazing that their kids know what they do. They could probably come to some gigs at this point, like some music venues or theaters that do comedy. They would be welcome at 16, I think.
Yeah.
But they are not interested.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the goal, my friend.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
For your kid to be like I said, Marilyn Rice Cup, I was like, is he interested in what you're talking about? She has a teenager too. She was like, no. Did you ever run material past him? She's like, no. He's not interested.
Right.
Not interested.
You want to make it look like some other loser job, just like anything else. Like the way I
Yeah,
looked
plus-
at my dad working at an insurance company for 40 years
Oh, yeah.
and coming home miserable every day. Yeah.
Did he ever say like, "Hey, do you want to come? It's bring your kid to work day. Do you want to come and see
yeah,
my desk?"
Yeah. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. No thanks.
Yeah, but nice beige suit, Dad. Love all the beige suits. Real good looking on you.
But exactly, like what you said, I wouldn't say that a lot of my material is particularly filthy either, but my son will sometimes be like, what are the jokes that you do? And I just have to be like, I don't think you would really get them, buddy. It's something that adults relate to. It's not going to be funny to a kid. And like, come on, please. Yeah. And then like every now and then I'll be like, all right, let me see what I can tell him that's not offensive. And I will. And he'll be like, I don't get it. And I'm like, see, now you think I suck. Now I've lost confidence in that joke that I used to think was good.
I know that you're got an ego
now we both feel
spiral.
Terrible. Yeah.
You're like, let me explain why this was funny. That's always how you know it's
right?
gone to crap. Yeah. Although my son claims there's no way he made up this joke, but I also didn't even Google it. But he was like, I made up a joke. And I was like, okay, what is it? He goes, what did the arrow say to the other arrow when he was sad? And I was like, what? And then he goes, what's the point?
Wow. Not bad.
I was like, that's pretty good. I was
very,
and then I went,
very emo.
I said, did you really make that up? I don't know. Immediately, I just took him down. I was like, I've heard that around, I think.
Wow. I like that. What's the point?
What's the point?
How nihilistic.
I know. Is your kid happy? Not sure. Not sure.
Yeah. You look at his artwork. It's just like that girl from The Ring. You know?
I know, right? It's like, I mean, all the comedy does come from pain.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, speaking of which, your new show, Leaving a Mark, a show about scars. Thank you for having me on, by the way, a couple weeks ago. It was a blast.
My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about that, the premise of it, and how you came to start this up.
I started this, like everything in my life, I started a long time ago. If anyone ever wants to know, whenever I get asked to be taken out for coffee by a new comic, and they're like, I just want to, pick your brain. I'm like, would you like to know the longest path between A and B? Because that's my journey. So I started on this show a long time ago. And it's when I say scars, it's real. I have scars all over my body. A huge number of them are from surgeries from a car accident I survived when I was a kid. Others are from some other smaller but memorable accidents. And I also have one from cancer, from breast cancer surgery. And so I made this as funny as I could for stuff that is intense and traumatic, but a lot of it is funny because I had a lot of these scars on my body most of my life. And so it really influenced who I was. And you don't see them on me, but they're on my torso. So that when I was like sleeping around with guys and having sex and just even discovering that, it played a big part in how I was trying to navigate that world. So I have a lot of stories about these along the way. And I decided to put it all together because I know many of us have scars of all different varieties or intensities. And a lot of them come from wild crap that happened in your childhood that's even just, playground stuff or, slight parental negligence stuff where something bad happened. The parents are like, we're not going to the hospital. And they're like, or drunken misadventures or stuff happens to people when they travel or, brawls with nature, to a lot of course, medical, surgical, life-saving stuff. So I wanted to kind of put together my story. And then there is a portion, which you were involved, where I go to the audience and I get them to have a competition with their scars, which was so fun and revealing every time.
Yeah.
And then I brought someone else up, being you as a special guest, to talk about their scar, because the other thing I noticed is nobody has even the smallest scar on their body and points at it and goes, I don't know. I don't remember anything. They pointed at a tiny scar and they're like, it was a sunny day, middle of March. Like, it's so specific. They remember what they wore. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I put all this together, and it is a narrative about me. And I don't accept all my scars. Just so you know, in this show, I talk about some of them that I've accepted and some of them that I haven't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was blown away watching it from several different aspects. One of them, I think it's great that you open it up to the audience, because something like that, you start talking about injuries and scars, it's an instant knee-jerk reaction to compare and contrast. So if you were to talk about all this stuff and not open it up to the audience, I feel like they would have a hard time concentrating on the rest of the show, because it immediately
Because they want to say their thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It immediately triggers all these, flashbacks and these moments. So to
Yeah.
be able to do it's a brilliant idea. Kind of like
Thank
gets
you.
it out of the way.
It's so fun. It's so fun because I feel like nobody talks to people about their scars.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's also, we notice them on each other. If they're in a visible area, you notice them, but it's also kind of, we're taught from a social standpoint of like, don't
That's
ask somebody what's that from. Wherever somebody does ask me what mine is from, I'm always like, hey, good for you. Like, I would be curious too,
Yeah, I mean, you never know what. And it's, of course, if anyone has ever asked me about my scar, I'm like, oh, I'm almost more impressed that they noticed to ask.
Yeah,
honestly.
Same here. Yeah. But yeah, I think that you putting it out to the audience like that immediately it makes it this very kind of cohesive thing where everybody's on the same page, everybody's kind of included in it. I think that's great. And then when you start talking about all your scars, I was like, Jesus Christ, this woman is like the Terminator. Like, I cannot believe the amount of shit that you have endured and walked away from.
Yeah,
it blew my mind.
I appreciate that. Sometimes when I fail on stage and leave, I'm like, why is this still affecting me? Shouldn't I have more resilience than this after everything? No, still human.
Yeah.
Still human.
You use it, you use it as a plea. Lift up your shirt. I'm a survivor, God damn it.
Right? I know. If only, after that, people just be like, that scary woman was on stage.
So you do that every show, though. That's an integral part of the show, is opening up to the crowd before you kind of get into your own various.
And it's different. It's different every night, which I love. And I love, as I'm sure, I don't know, actually, do you like talking to the crowd in your act? You do, right? A little bit?
I feel like, I'm glad you asked that. I feel like in like when you're doing like a 10-15 minute set around the city, that's so little time that you kind of want to, in the grand scheme of things, I never set out to do stand-up thinking, I want to know where people are from and how long this couple has been married.
Sure.
Like that was never the goal. Like you have an idea that you think is funny that you want to convey to people. Now things have gone the course where crowd work is so ubiquitous, and it seems like that's all that anybody wants to watch on TikTok. That like I feel like
that's what's happening. Yeah,
and I feel like I've seen so many comics that have great material kind of abandon that material and then just kind of present these questions to the audience, just hoping to get some, clippable content.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It started off because comics didn't want to burn their material by putting it all online. And then it was like, but if I want to pitch this for a late night spot, if I want to put this in my special, like it's already gone. I don't even know if that's true anymore because we consume the stuff so quickly and furiously. But then it just became all crowd work that was up there for that reason. It really was to save people so their material was still their own, only to be experienced live or how they wanted to put it up. But then it set up a different expectation with an audience that maybe has never even been to a comedy club, where they're like, this is what it is. And now the two, it's like talking about a dragon snake eating its own tail. I was going to say a dragon. Too many kids' books.
Too many, yeah.
And I like talking to the crowd, I will say, and I do it sparingly. Of course, I host a lot, so there is an expectation in some places that you do a lot of that. I don't do all of it because I, too, love writing material.
Yeah.
Like that's, But in this case, I want to do more crowd work in the Scars show. I want to figure out when I remount it how to actually have it a few more times in the show, because gathering these small stories from people, I was like, I don't know if I've ever done crowd work like this where it's thematic. Like you're like, we're not, I don't care where you're from. I don't care what your job is. Nothing. We're talking about this specific theme.
Yeah.
And I need 3 or 4 stories from you. And it's interesting because the people, it's just so many, I mean, some people just freely admitted in that public forum some really vulnerable personal stuff, which I love. I invite, I'll take care of them. We're good. And then other people have really just like the most, you couldn't even make it up. Like someone was mentioned that they have this divot right in between their eyes. There's their scar right in between their eyes. And it's from having like a stereo system and trying to like, they wanted to pry open a speaker because they thought they could like mess with the wires to make it sound better. And
sounds like a carjacking gone wrong.
I know. And instead of like getting a tool, they were just trying to use a butter knife. And basically from the action of trying to leverage it in there to pop it out, it just, the force of it just made their hand and the knife just go right between their eyes and they carved out. And you're just like, that is, how else would we have ever gotten to that story? Like,
yeah.
That's what I loved about it. And sometimes people came up to me afterwards and said, I was like, oh yeah, I don't have any scars. And at the end they were like, oh, I totally have scars.
Yeah. That's so funny that the butter knife thing, because that's pretty much what happened to my dad to a certain extent. Years before I was born, this is maybe 20 years before I was born. He was grilling. It was like a 4th of July cookout. He was grilling some burgers and he was using one of those 2-prong barbecue forks. And he was trying to flip the burgers with one of those, and he caught it on the grill and tried to jimmy it loose, and it sprung out of his hand and popped him in the eye, and he lost the eye. He has a glass eye. He's had a glass eye for the last 60 years.
Barbecue accident.
Yeah. Yep.
Shit.
From stabbing himself in the eye. So, like I have my scar on my face. He has this thing. My son, when he was 2.5, and this is the thing, even people, even comics that are on the show, like I was talking about one scar in particular, but like I started going through this whole Rolodex of freak accidents that have happened throughout my family. My son, when he was 2.5, stabbed himself in the eye with a stick. He was running with a stick and fell and it went this deep into his eye. Luckily, it went in the corner. And it didn't do any damage to the eyeball itself, but it severed his tear duct. He had to have emergency surgery. He had an eye patch for 3 days.
Were you freaking out?
Oh, it was terrifying. Terrifying.
Yeah. All right, here's my Mother of the Year story. And I'm just going to preface by saying it's by no comparison because it is what happened to my son is very minor, but it's just happened. I was on my way to Austin, Texas to do some comedy. And while I am in the Delta Lounge, I will admit, I was in the Delta Lounge.
Quit bragging.
I got a call from my husband that the school called that our son had fallen at recess and his head was bleeding a lot. And my husband got there. And so I was already freaking out. I'm like, what do I do? But I was like, okay, tell me, like, look at him and tell me what the deal is. And then he was like, he's going to need stitches. And I was freaking out. And it did seem like it was fairly under control and that it wasn't a big cut, but it was a deep cut. But I guess my husband was freaking out and he was kind of trying to put on a better tone for me over the phone that was also trying to assess things. And in the end, like he only needed 3 stitches and I decided to take my trip. But there was a moment there in the Delta. I felt guilty and I almost did not have another mimosa. But I felt so conflicted about everything. I mean, my life, his life, scars, me not working, career. Everything just came crashing in that moment.
Yeah.
Of and then I got over it, and he's fine. And the stitches are dissolving, which is just amazing to me. I forgot that that's what happens now.
Mm-hmm.
And he will have a scar. And anytime I mention that to someone, they go, "Oh, that's so, you just wrote a show about that and did a show. That's great. Now he has a," and I'm like, you know what my goal in life is? No more stories. Like, it's one thing to have survived trauma and to work on it, and it's part of your life, and you have a certain distance and acceptance of it, or you're even working on it to be able to make it into something fit for entertainment. I'm not doing therapy with that show. It's supposed to be for entertainment.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking for a new chapter.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You got all these other ones. You want the rest of your life to be the most boring existence possible.
Exactly. No more stories.
God. I know, and I understand, like, that helplessness that you feel when you're not around. Like, luckily, when this happened to my son, I hate to say that I had a premonition, but, like, I remember that morning I was packing a bag to go do a road gig upstate, and my phone rang right as I was about to get in the shower, and it was my wife calling me, and I knew, I talked to her on the phone 6-7 times a day, probably, just checking in. And I knew when the phone rang, something was wrong. I knew that she was with him, and I knew that something was wrong. And sure enough, when I picked up the phone, he's screaming in the background. And there was enough time. I was able to call and have somebody replace me on the gig, and I went to the hospital and was able to be there with him. But, like, I also felt like, it didn't happen on my watch, happened on hers. So I was guilt-free. That was nice.
Why do you say that? Because I got home from Austin, and the first thing I said to my husband, like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Thank you, of course, whatever. And he said, I'm just so glad it didn't happen while I was with him. But because you would have never have forgiven me. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
He's right. But yeah. I mean, of course I would have forgiven him, but my first instinct would have been like, well, what were you looking at your phone?
Yeah.
That would have been my first instinct.
Sure.
To just give him a hard time about it.
Yep. I had Chris Gethard on a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, he was FaceTiming with his wife and son while I think he was in LA or something. He was across the country, and he watched in real time over a FaceTime call, his son, like, jump off a couch and split his head open on a coffee table and just popped up in front of the screen, just blood pouring down his face. And just the helplessness. There's nothing you can do.
Nothing you could do.
At all.
I did have the moment where I don't know if this sounds cold or correct. That's my new game show. Am I cold or correct?
That's awesome. That's like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Asshole or autistic, right?
Yeah. Because I thought, if I abandon this trip, get in a cab, and go right now to meet them at the hospital, what am I adding to the mix that will make it better?
Yep.
Like, what positive thing am I adding to this mix other than, I don't know, just showering everybody with my panic and anxiety about it?
Yes.
So I was like, I can comfort my son, but he is also in the capable hands of his father,
right,
who is good at comforting. So in theory, I don't know, like, I can't sew. I've never put a stitch in. I can sew clothes, but I can't put a stitch in flesh. So I'm not adding medical expertise.
Yeah. Exactly. You're just adding more anxiety, piling on more anxiety. Yeah, that's my kid needs another scared face hovering over him.
Exactly, because I've had those scared faces look at me a lot of my life, and it is one of my number one things that I despise.
Yeah.
And I know the face of you looking up at someone and going, is it okay? And their face saying no, but the words they are saying are like, oh yeah, it's going to be fine. And you're like, you're fucking lying to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. I've been there too many times. And I'm like,
But the irony of me, and we can get as into this or not as into this as you want to, but the irony of me talking to you today, when last night, so I had this experience with my son at Dave & Buster's, right? And it was like, we wound up making the most of it, but it was like, I feel like anytime you're trying to have fun, it always blows up in your face. I feel like
Absolutely.
spontaneous fun is the only real fun you're going to have. So anyway, he spends 30 minutes in the fucking gift store trying to figure out how many tickets he has and what kind of useless plastic crap he can get with his
you let that
1,800
happen.
tickets. Yes. But I made him do the math. This wound up being basically an extension of school because he had to read me the names of all the games. He had to read me the instructions for all the games. And then when we got to the store, he had to do all the math to figure out how many tickets he had and how many tickets he had left, depending on what he picked out. So I was like, you still want to come to Dave & Buster's if it's basically like, it's just a continuation of school. Great. Have at it.
Yep.
So he picks out his shit. We get in the car. Also, it's like a fucking casino in there. There's no windows. There's no clocks.
Oh, yeah.
I thought we were in there for 2 hours. We got out. It was almost 9 o'clock. He's usually in bed, lights out, 8:30. And we get out. It's 9 o'clock. So I'm like sprinting to the car. I'm calling my wife, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had my phone on the whole time. I could have checked my phone, but I was like, I completely lost track of time. So we get in the car and we're driving home and we're about 6 blocks. Luckily, it's not that far. Dave & Buster's is in downtown Brooklyn. We're like 30 blocks up in South Park Slope. We're like 6 blocks from home. I look in the rearview mirror and he is unbuckled. His seatbelt is not on. And I locked up, I shouldn't say I locked up the brakes. I slowly came to a stop, pulled over, put his seatbelt on. I didn't even say anything. And the spiral of self-hatred and guilt and shame I felt after he had just called me a loser like 2 hours before and then be like, yeah, he was right. I'm a fucking loser. Doesn't matter how many times I take him to Dave & Buster's or how many times I try to, do cool, fun, surprising things for him. If he goes through the fucking windshield, it doesn't matter what I've done to try to be dad of the year.
Yeah. No, and just to make you feel better, I've done that. And also my son learned how to unbuckle himself at some point, and he thought that was a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drive me into hysterics, basically.
Yeah.
But because a kid can unbuckle themselves with some ease, but they can't buckle themselves back up, as it turns out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, oh God, yeah, no. Everyone drops their baby at some point, I think, as I say that in a totally crazy way. But I do remember dropping. It was just from the couch to the floor, but it made a big thud. Right. Dropping my child and scooping right back up and, I don't know, still had a floppy head. So I was like, it's fine, right? And I remember it. There's so many things I don't remember. I remember that clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good the things that stay with you. It's perfect.
Right.
Thanks, brain.
But it made me think of you and the car accident element of your show. How old were you when that happened?
8.
You were 8. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And so feel free to, I want people to see your show. I don't want to give away any surprises. I don't want to dig in anything you don't feel comfortable talking about.
I talked about this from every angle. I don't know. Okay. Let's see if you can do it. Let's see if you can
find a new angle. Challenge accepted. All right. You were 8. Obviously, your seatbelt was on. Right? You were buckled up,
you know
I'm
what?
hoping.
I'm going to say right now, I don't know.
Really?
I don't know. I assume so. I assume so because I think we would have been thrown from the car, and we did not. I was in the back seat, and although we had I have injuries that are related to impact, they weren't related to being thrown. And I think with the impact, we would have been thrown, and no one was thrown. No one went through windshields.
Yeah.
Right. And we were little. So when you're little, you fly.
Right.
You don't have the weight to even push you one way or the other. But the injuries were extensive.
Yeah.
And something I did not mention in the show because it's just an extraneous detail that I couldn't figure out how to put in a way that would be nothing other than quite distracting, honestly. Is that, and I'm just going to go forward in the story for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please
Doug.
do. Yeah.
Is that, there were I talk about 4 people being in the car. Eventually, I first talk about it in a different way. But anyways, there were 4 people in the car. Not everyone survived. I did, obviously, but not everyone survived. But the truth is, there were 5 people in that car. And one of them was my friend's little brother, who, just to put it in fucking crazy context, this was not that weird of a thing, that back then it was like it was a hatchback. He rode in the hatchback. He literally was in the hatchback of a Honda Civic, and he walked away with a bruise.
Wow.
Technically in the most dangerous situation of all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Untethered, in a hatchback, not even a seat.
Right. That's
but
nuts.
Because of how the impact happened, he walked away without a scratch.
Wow.
I've had to conceptualize my own story and come to terms with how you even make sense of an accident, because, not many of us, this is why, religion exists, because not many of us are pretty good with things are random.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Things are random. It's true, but it's hard.
Right. Yeah, I know. I was just talking to Christy Cello about the fact, like, both of us were bringing up the point that we hate when people say everything happens for a reason, and that when somebody says everything happens for a reason, it's like, if you say that and you can really believe that, then you haven't really experienced any tragedy in your life.
Well, too, I find that there is this thing, and I've heard it before, and I think people do it with great tragedy, but I think it is a desperate need to rewrite your story, which on some level I go, great. Like you literally go, I'm in a good place right now, and I would have never been in this good place if this thing hadn't fucked up everything.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting way to look at your life. I think you have to really drink a big glass of fucking stupidity to convince yourself into that one. Because that is just getting, you have to be so reductionist in your life to make that thread nice and taut between those two events.
Yeah.
But I know it is, because we're all looking for, I call it I don't know, evolution, like life evolution. You always want to think and then it got better, and then it got better. I don't know how we're raised to believe this. Then it got better, even though the rest of our verbiage is things were so great when we were a kid. Oh my God, people high school is the best years of my life. But I think the rest of us live in this world that we, our life is supposed to get better and better and better. And if it doesn't, how do you recreate that story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Where I feel like I'm getting to the place where, as I get older, you start to realize, oh no, your life, you can have amazing accomplishments and have fruitful, enriching relationships and, more love in your life. But you also, as time goes on, you're just going to inevitably experience more loss and tragedy. That's just how things unfold.
Yes,
it's unavoidable.
Unfortunately, I do remember, and I think I must have thought this way after the car accident because it's a clear memory. So, but I wasn't old. I wasn't even a preteen yet. I feel like I was 10. I remember thinking, oh, it doesn't matter what I do. There will always be more disappointments.
Mm-hmm.
And no wonder my kid told that joke. What's the point? We are genetically linked, but it's true. No, there's just no, as my therapist says, who ghosted me this week. More on that later. But my therapist said, no one gets out of this one alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So, and I hate the platitudes. Trust me, I always go, God, it must be so great to be everything happens for a reason. It must be so freeing to think that way.
Yeah.
You bounce down the street. Yeah, everything happens for a reason, instead of I have to work on making sense of this and grieve at different points in my life forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because life is brutal and cold and nasty and traumatic and violent, and just shit happens all the time.
I think that's why I have such a problem with people saying that. It's almost like jealousy that I can't embrace
Oh,
that.
yeah. Absolutely. I'm
Like, oh, if you
so
really,
jealous.
really believe that and you can really integrate that into your whole outlook on life, that's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your comedy, but that's amazing.
Yes. Yes. I feel like
Yeah.
that I think I've only seen it one time because it's one of those movies that's so intense. You're like, I don't know if I need a repeat viewing. But you know that scene in the beginning of Saving Private Ryan where they're storming the beach at
Oh,
Normandy and there's just
God.
bullets whizzing by?
Yes.
That I feel like that is like the perfect metaphor for life. You just got bullets whizzing past you and you just pray that they don't hit you. They're
They
going
don't
to
hit
hit
you.
somebody. They're going to hit somebody. You're going to watch
some
your
point.
buddies experience this. You're going to watch, and at some point they will hit you. It's just how far can you go before they do.
That's right.
know?
Yeah. And I know we're all supposed to, and then with that in mind, you can go with a different platitude and you can do some sort of version of like, every day you wake up, blah, 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 today's a gift.
Yeah.
And that also doesn't work because not every day feels like a gift, and it shouldn't. Like it shouldn't. Like, yeah, alive. I get it. We're all primed here to be alive. But
some days you want to re-gift, right?
Yeah, you want to re-gift, or you're just sort of like, not what I wanted, not what I asked.
Yeah. Did you get a gift receipt?
Yeah, exactly. Side note, my mother always told me that when I asked her where I came from, she told me that she bought me at a store. That was her myth for where babies came from. And I, she was the biggest bargain hunter I've ever met in my life. And I put those things together early. And I was always like, I was on a sale rack, because she never ever bought anything that was not on a sale rack or a clearance rack. I was on clearance. So, yeah, so I have a hard time with the platitudes. And even, with the car accident, I think there was a time in my life that I did not make it about it all happened for a reason, but I made it about I have reached my quota. I've already reached and surpassed the quota of traumatic things that can happen to me. So I'm free. Like I just assumed, other things will come for other people, but I already had mine.
Yeah.
Well, still, that's not true, everybody.
No, it's not. But I mean, that's, you try to take comfort and find peace in the world however you can. And I've done the exact same thing. I've gone through like, oh, well, I've had this happen. Hopefully I will be getting a break for a little while. I'm sure there will be a resurgence at some point in my life, but hopefully right now, all this bad shit will happen to some other folks for a little while.
Yeah.
And it's not like you want to wish evil upon other people, but you're like, all right, I've paid my dues for a little while. It's someone else's turn.
I've literally screamed. I'm not religious at all. And yet somehow God still finds its way into my brain and mouth at times, just because I wasn't raised religious, but Jewish, and the idea of God was floating around. So God's still floating around in my brain. And I have often in desperation literally looked at the sky and said, leave me the fuck alone, God. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Not Satan. Satan, I think, is a good guy. God, leave me the fuck alone. Look at somebody else. Pretend I'm not
funny.
Here.
That's so funny. No one's ever blamed Satan for anything. No one's ever said, why, Satan, why?
Yeah.
That's not a phrase that exists.
No.
Right?
No, I guess it would be like,
Satan,
I get it,
damn
Satan.
It. No one takes Satan's name in vain. Yeah, I also am not religious anymore, but I'm now working on this solo show about my Jehovah's Witness years, and I have had to growing up, I was under the belief that there was a God who was a very punishing God, and all these bad things that were happening were because I wasn't upholding my end of the bargain,
Sure.
So it's taken me a long time to undo that and see whatever kind of tragedies do happen. It's out of my control, and I've had to fight that for a long time. And I still do, thinking, and it's an illusion to think that you have control over anything when we're,
well, and it's also
beyond insignificant
damaging.
specks of dust.
Yeah, it's very damaging because on one end, I mean, I even think the idea of karma, I personally just wish karma existed on some level, because it's just a very convenient way to look at things. You're like, oh, bad people will be punished and good people will be rewarded. And I think we can look around and just find just blatant examples all the time. But then it also means, when you just don't want the thing where someone gets cancer from drinking poisoned water, but they have been indoctrinated to think that it's their fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, and that's just, and because we live in a world of needing this cause and effect. Yeah, we don't know
Right.
what it is, and we'll never know. And I think even if we did know, is that relieving?
Mhm.
Like, let's just say, I don't know. It was just like, oh, that car accident happened because like whatever. This is what movies do. They piece apart a story and go like, here are the events that led up to that. Like, there's a lot of, that's even like a time fuckery kind of thing where it's just like, oh, that's so interesting how these little tiny events will all add together to a large event. Right. So it's just like, oh, this guy did this and they got in this at this time and blah, blah, blah. And all in the end, it is such a collection, maybe the butterfly effect, of so many things that it becomes random. But it's never just like, you were bad and that's why you got cancer, or that's why you experienced loss. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And I have done my share of magical thinking, and I've done a lot of work on that. And I think the most compelling thing that anyone has ever said to me to counter it, because I've thought like, oh, if I don't, maybe it's a little bit of OCD, like if I don't think in certain ways, then bad things will happen to me. It could be, I can get in those patterns, and they will go, well, if you could do that, why aren't you like a millionaire and shit? Like, just do it for the good things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, right.
Totally. Fine. Yeah. I've done the same thing with magical thinking, and also finally had to come to terms with the fact that I can dwell on the idea of horrible things happening all day long if I let myself. I really can.
Oh, I'm so good at it.
But then had to kind of come to the realization that dwelling on those bad things happening doesn't stop them from happening. It doesn't have any effect either way. And I used to think that if I think it's going to happen, it won't happen, which is just blatantly untrue.
I used to do the same thing. I used to sit there at night and go, here, like, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to think about the outcome of this particular thing. I'm going to figure out all the different outcomes. Because if I can figure out all the different outcomes, I'm going to control the outcome.
Yeah.
And there would always be a new outcome that I had not conceptualized.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like... Oh.
And even gone to the extent of thinking like, oh, if I'm not thinking about horrible things happening, then I'm being irresponsible.
Yes! Exactly.
And as soon as I stop thinking about it, that's when it's going to
How dare you? Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, you let your guard down. You can't let your guard down, man.
That's the whole reason behind worrying. It's like, I must worry.
Yeah. Because
if I don't worry, the bad things will happen. Oh, God, we're fine. We're fine, people. We're totally fine. And then it's no wonder you're like, I feel good after 3 glasses of wine. That's because, the demons are quiet right now for 25 seconds. That's why.
Yeah. They're passed out in the corner. So had you talked about the car accident on stage at all before doing this show?
I had.
Or in any storytelling?
Yeah, I had. There is a version, probably it's got to be like 7 or 8 years old. Maybe, I think that's about right. When I first discovered The Moth, which is a storytelling organization with a radio show and a podcast, when I first became part of that, I had written a version of the story, but a very sad and a much more hospital, my experience in the hospital as a little kid version of what happened to me in the car accident. Not focused on the scars at all, truly. And The Moth wanted me to do it for a main stage. So I did it. There's a recording of it and a video from a while ago, and it was a very different story. I mean, of course, it was about the car accident, but that story is so big. There's so much more to it. You pick a lens in which to talk about it, and that one was a little bit more about being a little kid in a hospital and what my parents did to. There was no therapy. There was no counselors coming to talk to me, and what it was like to also become aware of the death of someone in the car accident, and as a little kid, and how they were trying to still let me be a kid in whatever way they could. You went to Dave and Buster's. My dad told me that I could have anything I wanted. He came to my bedside at the hospital. I was still in intensive care, and he told me I could have anything I wanted.
Wow.
And I was and I think in hindsight, this was a way to give a little kid a reason to live, something to look forward to, because I think even if you are going through like illness or tragedy or trauma right now, one of the best things is because you feel so locked into the present. One of the most freeing things can be to think about the future. It feels like freedom, because a lot of times when you're in those very brutal situations, you've lost sight of there being any future. You're literally imprisoned by the moment. And so, so I just was like, oh my God, what am I going to get? And I was trying out different possibilities, like running them by nurses and doctors. I was like, do you think I should get a TV and phone for my room? Like that's, such a thing. It was before iPads and the iPhones. I was like, do you think I should get a TV and phone for my room? And then I wanted the Barbie dream house. I just thought that was like, I saw it on television, and I had never seen it in a store, and I wanted the Barbie dream house. And how when I finally got home from the hospital, it was not available in Canada. We had to order from somehow, I don't even know how they did it. They ordered from the Mattel warehouse in the States, and the Barbie dream house arrived at my door one day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I imagine your dad having a certain level of anxiety right as those words left his mouth of like, oh, fuck, I hope I can pick?
Yeah.
I hope I can follow through on this.
Yeah. And so I'm even tearing up remembering it. Oh my God. Because now as a parent, I feel very different about it, honestly.
Yeah.
Because of that thing that you're saying, how we even opened this about, like, you want to reward that child. You want to think of like something that's going to make them happy, and you will go and do crazy things that you don't enjoy and would never do because you think they will. And to what extent you will try to pull off this magic for them that they hopefully will be like, that was magical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also that fine line though of like knowing that you can do this objectively amazing thing for them, give them this amazing experience. But if you're miserable and resentful of them as you're doing it, it's going to completely sour the whole deal.
It's not going to work at all.
They will actually have a better afternoon if you're like, we're just going to go home and, play a board game, or you can play some video and just be a stable, sane person rather than be like, aren't you having fun? Why aren't you eating your fucking French fries and drinking your delicious slushy?
Exactly. So, but the Barbie dream house, just so you know, totally worked out. I played with that thing for years, probably longer than I should have in hindsight for a young girl and dolls in a house. But I loved it.
I think is that it in the background right there? I think I see it.
Yeah, that's it. I do still have it. When I will say that it's in a big box, and it's actually in the warehouse of my nephew-in-law's store. Very long, but when my mother passed away right before the pandemic, and we had to clean out the house, and it was there, and I was like, what do I do with this thing? And it was it's an emotionally fraught object, and part of me was like, give it away. But it's if I knew if someone was like, my daughter would love this, or son, or whatever, like if any child, I don't care what child, what gender, I just said daughter because I was a daughter, would play with this and get a lot. I would have given it to them, but I just did not know that person at the moment where I had to figure out what to do with it. So I just kept it. So it's in my life somewhere.
I would never be able to part ways with that. That's more along the times of magical, along the lines of magical thinking. Like, oh, if I get rid of this that has such significance and importance in my life, so I would be worried that something bad would happen just by proxy of giving away something of that level of significance.
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
I looked at it a little bit in the box and it was in pieces, but man, I was just, brought back. Because every dumb plastic part of that Barbie dream house I remember like it just felt so significant. It really did, looking at that, like the dumb little plastic flowers that were in the pots in front of the dream house, just all of the stuff, even the colors of it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful.
So it was also, it was a good present in a sense because I escaped into it. It was storytelling with these pretty little things and these pretty little objects, and they all had a little dream life, and I was into retaining that dream life. My Barbie wasn't one that went on brutal adventures. It was very, very good life. She had a very good life, Barbie.
Yeah. No stories to be told.
No stories to be told.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
This was a blast, and I hope everybody gets a chance to check out your show and share their own traumatic scar stories.
Please, I'm here for you. We're all in this. We're all in this together. But as they say with the scars, which is one platitude I will get behind, is that if you have a scar, that probably means you're still here. So you won.
Yeah. Amen.
So there you go.
Amen. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you, Doug.
There you go, folks. Ophira Eisenberg. Make sure you give her a follow on the gram at Ophira Ophira, the letter E. Keep abreast of all her shows, her books. She's a published author. She has a great podcast, but please check out Leaving a Mark, a show about scars. She has a fantastic new podcast called Parenting is a Joke, where she talks to comedians and other creative types about what it's like to be a parent while holding on to this career that can so easily slip through one's fingers. Even if you don't have a child, it's hard to hold on to. So it's great. A lot of really great nuggets of wisdom in that podcast. It's very, very funny too. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube, youtube.com/@WhoDougSmith. Check out the Patreon, please. Please support the show through the Patreon. It would mean a ton if you could donate just $5 a month. You can fuel and keep this podcast going. $5 a month is all it takes. You get full ad-free video, early access to each episode, and I'm going to be posting a lot more bonus content on there very soon. Patreon.com/JehovahBoy. And please make sure to give me a follow on Instagram @WhoDougSmith. Email the show if you are so inclined. If you yourself are a former Jehovah's Witness, current Jehovah's Witness, Scientologist, Mormon, Hasidic Jew, any stories of religious trauma, we would love to hear them, because we're going to start doing some solo episodes actually addressing viewer emails. Listener emails. Viewer and listener. However the fuck you intake this podcast, however you get this in your veins, hit us up if you can relate to any stories of religious trauma. We'd love to share your story on the air, and because that's what this is about. It's about helping other people, giving them hope that there is a way out, there's a life outside, and embrace it. So please email the show. It would help if I gave you the email address, wouldn't it? Do you want it? You want the email address? Hit us up, JehovahBoyPodcast@gmail.com. That's the one, JehovahBoyPodcast@gmail.com. And perhaps most importantly, it just dawned on me that I have not done this for any other episode. We're on episode 7 now. And I have not directly thanked my producer, George. But without him, this would not be possible at all, because I am a technological retard. I know you're not supposed to use that word, but there is no more fitting word. I am just a when it comes to all things technology. So without him, this would not be possible. Give him a follow on Instagram at Dr. Photograph. Please give George a follow. Show him your support. He's the man behind the whole operation. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate the support. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.